My name is Serena Calloway. I don't wear name tags, I don't chase attention, and I definitely don't correct people when they underestimate me. I let them. That night, I was just another guest at my sister's corporate mixer, held in the lobby of a sustainability center I'd personally helped fund. Jessica didn't know that, of course. She never asked. She was in the middle of a group swirling white wine and laughing a little too loudly. "Serena," she said when someone asked. "Oh, she's still figuring life out. Last I checked, she was making candles, or consulting, or something." The group laughed politely. One woman glanced over at me and smiled like she pitied me. I didn't flinch. I never do. I sipped my drink and let the moment pass. Then the door opened and her boss walked in. He scanned the room, offered a nod to the receptionist, and turned his head just enough to see me by the window. He stopped walking. His mouth opened slightly. "You're," he said, voice uncertain, eyes wide. "You're Founder Calloway of TerraBloom." Every glass in that room paused midair, and Jessica dropped hers. I didn't say anything right away. I just placed my drink down on the table next to me, turned to face him fully, and gave the smallest of nods. "Good evening," I said. "I see we're finally being properly introduced." Growing up, I was the quiet one, the serious one, the girl who read soil chemistry books at lunch, while my younger sister Jessica choreographed talent show routines and brought home most outgoing ribbons like they were candy. She sparkled. People noticed her. Teachers remembered her. Our parents adored her, ease her charm the way she made their lives feel smoother. And me, I asked too many questions, spent too much time in the backyard digging holes to test earth pH and noting the behavior of roots in different conditions. I remember once I tried to show Dad a miniature irrigation system I built using soda bottles and medical tubing. He blinked, patted my shoulder, and turned to ask Jessica about her latest dance class. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have. At school, I found my tribe, sort of. Lab partners who didn't mind silence. Professors who encouraged my obsession with microbial networks. When I earned a full ride to study soil ecology at a Midwestern university, my mother tried to hide her disappointment behind a tight-lipped smile. "But what will you do with that?" she asked. "Is that even a real career?" By the time I turned 22, I stopped trying to explain myself. When I declined a consulting job with a chemical agriculture firm, one Dad had pulled strings to help me get, he didn't speak to me for weeks. Mom sent Jessica to talk to me, thinking she could reason me back to sense. "You're brilliant," Jessica said that day, perched on the edge of my twin bed, her perfume too strong in my tiny apartment. "But don't you want a real life? A nice salary? People who respect you?" I looked at her, and for the first time realized we didn't speak the same language. "I want to build something that matters," I said. She smiled, thin and polite. "That's great. Just don't make it so hard for yourself, okay?" I didn't respond. And a month later, I packed up everything I owned into a second-hand Jeep and drove west. No one called. No one asked where I'd gone. And for the first time, I realized being forgotten wasn't painful. It was clarifying. I rented a studio over an old hardware store in Oregon and began building TerraBloom. Quietly, slowly. I pulled grant funding from obscure environmental research circles, borrowed equipment, partnered with growers who believed in testing over marketing. I worked out of sheds, converted barns, even a shipping container once. For years, I existed as a footnote in other people's success, but the data spoke. And over time, the data shouted. By the 5th year, our systems were restoring depleted farmland across 4 states. Our tech was featured in white papers and academic panels credited anonymously to founder SC. That's how I liked it. No one could link it back to me. Not my family. Not Jessica. Not anyone from the world that once laughed at the word ecology. But then came the conference. A major partner wanted to showcase our pilot site. They planned to host a mixer there, invite stakeholders from corporate green initiatives, including Jessica's firm. When I saw her name on the RSVP list, something in me froze. Not from fear, not resentment, from recognition. The past doesn't always call. Sometimes it shows up at your door, wearing heels and a badge, and pretending it's never met you. I confirmed attendance. Quietly. Under my full name. Let her see me now, but not through performance, through proof. And when she looked right at me that night, introduced me to her colleagues as my sister, whose kind of between things, I said nothing. Because the part of me that once needed her to see me didn't anymore. But the part of me that built something worth seeing, that part was wide awake. Tara Bloom wasn't born out of ambition. It was born out of necessity. I didn't set out to become a founder. I set out to solve a question no one else was asking. What if the problem with our food system wasn't the crops, but the soil's memory? What if decades of abuse had made the land forget how to grow? Those were the kinds of thoughts that got you laughed out of conference rooms. So I stopped asking out loud. I started building instead. The early days were raw. I coded data models by candlelight during blackouts, ate canned soup 6 days a week, lived off grant scraps, moonlighted as a copy editor for peer-reviewed journals, and crashed on lab floors more times than I can count. But the work kept calling. Soil degradation, crop resilience, microbial regeneration. I didn't want headlines. I wanted answers. By year 2, I had a prototype, a closed-loop biofeedback system that allowed nutrient-depleted land to rebuild microbial diversity without synthetic input. It worked in 1 out of 10 tests, but the 9th failure always taught me more than the one success. We launched small community farms in Oregon and New Mexico, then 2 school pilot gardens in Appalachia. No press, no splash, just results. Quiet, measurable, relentless. I hid behind initials SC in research logs, founder fields, and grant applications. My face never appeared in articles. If someone insisted on attribution, I'd redirect it to a project lead or a field technician. I didn't need the spotlight. I needed space. People assumed Tara Bloom was run by a team of anonymous academics or an eccentric think tank. I let them think that. Even as it grew, 10 employees, then 30, I kept my name off the board. No LinkedIn, no interviews. I watched colleagues win awards for papers we'd ghostwritten. I applauded from the back row, because I wasn't chasing recognition. I was chasing root systems that could survive climate collapse, and in that pursuit, I built something unshakable. We expanded to 4 research hubs each with its own microclimate simulation. I began mentoring a few young women, quiet ones like I used to be. One, Lily, didn't speak during her entire first internship week, but she sketched diagrams of root entanglement so precise, I thought she might have been born with a microscope for eyes. I saw myself in her, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone in the work. Somewhere in the 5th year, a global sustainability fund reached out. They wanted to sponsor a series of Tara Bloom-led field trials. It was the break we never planned for. But there was one condition: public engagement. They wanted workshops, media coverage, mixer events. My instinct screamed no. But my team, Lily included, looked at me with the kind of trust you can't betray. So I agreed. And that's how the event happened. Jessica's firm was one of the invited partners. They'd invested in Green Optics, a PR move dressed up as sustainability. She worked in communications, of course, always knew how to spin a story, even when there wasn't one. When I saw her name on the guest list, I hesitated. The urge to retreat was strong. But Lily, unaware of my past, asked me that morning, "Will you be there? I want them to see who built this." That stopped me. I said yes. Not because of Jessica, not even because of Lily, but because maybe after all these years, I was finally ready to stop hiding behind a lowercase version of myself. At the event, I wore my usual tailored slate gray, no jewelry, no title. Just a name tag that said Dr. Serena Calloway, guest collaborator. Jessica never looked twice. And that was the strangest part. To her, I was forgettable. Background noise. A sister to nod at once a year and forget again by dessert. But I had built a world she now stood inside of. And she didn't even know she owed it breath. The message came on a Thursday. One of those short, chirpy texts that read more like obligation than sentiment. Hey, company mixer next weekend. Wanna come? Just a small thing, networking and drinks. Might be fun. It was from Jessica. No context. No follow-up. Just the kind of half-hearted invite you send to someone you barely remember you're related to. I stared at the screen longer than I care to admit. It had been almost 4 years since we last spoke. Even then, our conversation had been more posture than substance. She'd called to ask if I could edit her LinkedIn bio, since you're good with words and sciencey stuff, and I'd declined as politely as possible. Now, here she was again. Not asking how I was not offering an apology or a bridge, just extending a convenience invite. A prop seat at the table so she could say she'd included me. I almost deleted the message. Then, I saw the venue listed at the bottom. Hosted at the Klein Center Green Room 4. The Klein Center, one of TerraBloom's primary field testing hubs, renovated with our funding, operated with our data. It wasn't just a space we sponsored, it was one we built ground up with our own hands and code and stubbornness. Jessica had no idea. It was almost poetic. I replied simply, sure. I'll be there. The week leading up to the event, I didn't tell anyone. Not my staff, not Lily, not even the director of that site. I wanted to arrive like a question mark. No trumpet, no press badge, just me. I showed up 15 minutes before start time, as I always do, early enough to observe, late enough not to draw notice. The lobby smelled like eucalyptus and new carpet. My shoes echoed on the polished floor as I crossed to the registration table. The young woman behind the check-in desk glanced up and smiled. Name Dr. Serena Calloway. She looked at her tablet, then blinked. Oh, you're marked as guest collaborator. Right this way, please. Her tone shifted slightly. Warmer, curious. She gestured toward a lanyard with a dark green badge 1 level above the standard name tag. I clipped it on. Inside the room pulsed with low music and corporate chatter. Platters of hors d'oeuvres floated by on trays. Someone laughed too loud near the bar, and Jessica Flawless in a navy wrap dress stood surrounded by a small crowd. Her hand gestures were animated, her voice, the polished purr of someone who had told the same story too many times. She spotted me, waved briefly, and then turned back to her audience. Later, when someone in her circle asked who I was, she laughed and said, "That's my sister, Serena. She's between projects right now, between projects." As if the last decade of my life had been a whim. As if the foundation of this building, the research displayed on the walls, the kids whose hands had pulled food from once dead soil just steps away meant nothing. But I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct her. I just stood by the moss wall installation, sipping sparkling water, watching them all move through a space they didn't know I built. Because I wasn't there for a scene. I was there for a shift. And I could feel it coming like air pressure before a storm. They dimmed the lights just a touch before the keynote began. A soft hush settled across the room, the clinking of glasses replaced by the low shuffle of chairs and phones sliding into pockets. Jessica took the stage first, of course. She looked the part, perfectly centered under the TerraBloom logo, with a voice smooth enough to code over anything she didn't understand. Her speech was practiced green initiatives, partnership, community-driven science. I almost admired her. Almost. And now she said, cueing the final slide, I'd like to introduce someone very special, the founder of the technology behind this pilot site. Their innovation has transformed the way we think about sustainable soil reclamation. Please welcome. She turned toward the wings. Her smile faltered. A man in a gray suit stepped forward, Mr. Halverson, CEO of her company, and took the mic. Tonight, we're honored to be joined by the mind behind TerraBloom's adaptive soil system, the founder themselves, one of the most elusive and impactful figures in regenerative agriculture today. He scanned the room, and then his gaze landed on me. He blinked. Just once. Then his posture changed. He took a half-step forward, microphone dipping, as if his brain was trying to catch up to his eyes. You're, he said loud enough for the front rows to hear. You're Founder Calloway. Every head in the room turned, some confused, some curious, some like Jessica's frozen. I stood slowly. It wasn't dramatic. There was no flourish, just quiet movement. My chair scraped the floor as I stepped out from behind it and walked toward the stage. Halverson still hadn't moved. Behind him, the LED screen displayed a looping animation of root systems growing in fractal complexity, a visual metaphor for the work I'd lived and bled for. And in that moment, for the first time, those roots felt like they had my name on them. I stopped 2 feet from the edge of the platform. "Yes," I said, calm and even. "I'm Serena Calloway." Jessica's glass slipped from her hand. It hit the floor with a sound sharper than it should have been, shattering the silence in more ways than one. No one picked it up. Halverson recovered quickly. "We're honored," he said, his voice suddenly reverent. "Truly honored to have you here." He reached for my hand. I took it. A flashbulb went off somewhere near the back. And just like that, the room exhaled. There were murmurs low and buzzing. I caught a few words: visionary, hidden genius. Wait, that's her sister Jessica hadn't moved. She stood near the back, now half lit by the green uplighting arms, crossed tightly across her chest, face pale. Someone leaned toward her, whispered something. She didn't respond. Her eyes stayed locked on me, like I'd performed some impossible trick. But I hadn't. I'd just shown up. When I was handed the mic, I didn't launch into a speech. I simply turned to the crowd and said I spent a long time believing that if my work was good enough, someone would eventually notice. Tonight, I'm reminded that sometimes they do. I stepped off the stage before they could clap too hard. Back at my table, I sat slowly, pulse steady. I didn't look for Jessica. I didn't need to, because the silence around her was louder than any applause I could have asked for. I found her outside, standing beneath the soft glow of the awning lights, arms tight around herself, despite the warmth in the air. She didn't look up when I approached. For a moment, I thought about turning back, letting the night end exactly where it had on that stage in silence. But something in her posture stopped me. Not shame, not anger, uncertainty. I stepped closer. The gravel crunched under my heels. Jessica finally turned. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. "You could have told me." I raised an eyebrow, not unkindly. When she hesitated, "I don't know. Before. Years ago. At dinner, or on the phone, or you never asked." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes searched my face like she was seeing it for the first time, not just looking, but trying to understand the shape of it beneath all the years she'd ignored. "I thought you were just drifting," she said, "doing odd jobs, avoiding real life." I nodded slowly. "You were comfortable thinking that?" That landed. Her shoulders dropped a little. "I didn't mean to." She stopped. "Tried again. I wasn't trying to diminish what you were doing. I just didn't know how big it was." "That's the thing," I said, folding my arms. "You didn't want to know. It was easier to assume I failed than to imagine I was building something without your approval." She winced. The silence stretched heavy, but not hostile. "I was jealous," she admitted, eyes fixed on the pavement. "Not of what you did. I didn't even know what it was, but of how you didn't need any of us. I always needed to be seen. Praised. You didn't." I didn't correct her. She wasn't entirely right. I had wanted to be seen desperately once, but I had grown into someone who didn't need it. That distinction was mine alone to carry. After a long pause, she reached into her bag and pulled out something small, a black leather notebook, slim and new. "I made this," she said almost sheepishly. "For your program, for the girls you mentor. It's just a draft. But I thought maybe they'd like a section on how to speak with confidence, how to explain your work without apology." I took the notebook carefully. It felt warm, like it had been held too tightly. "I remember you used to hate public speaking," I said softly. She laughed, a dry sound. "Still do. But I figured if someone had given me a way to talk about what mattered when I was 13, maybe I'd have spent less time pretending and more time learning." I didn't say, "Thank you," not yet. But I tucked the notebook under my arm. That was enough. We didn't hug. There were no tears. Just a quiet understanding planted like a seed between us, too early to call forgiveness. But maybe A beginning. Before we parted, she looked at me again. I don't expect you to forget everything she said, but I'd like to show up differently from now on, if you'll let me. I nodded once, and that was it. She walked to her car. I stayed under the awning a moment longer, watching the dust swirl in the light above the door. She had finally seen me. Not because I demanded it, not because I forced her to, but because I had built something she couldn't ignore. 6 months later, Jessica started volunteering twice a month at one of our rural STEM partner schools. She never made a grand announcement, never asked for recognition. She just showed up early, sleeves rolled a little uncertain, but entirely present. The first time I saw her in the greenhouse classroom, kneeling beside a girl who stammered through an explanation of a soil test, I held my breath. Jessica didn't interrupt. She waited, then said gently, "That was actually really clear. Want to try saying it again, just louder for the group?" The girl beamed. After that, Jessica began drafting communication guides for shy kids: how to speak when your hands shake, how to explain data when no one in your family understands what data even means. She sent me versions in neat PDF folders titled, "Quiet Doesn't Mean Invisible." I read every one. Sometimes I'd find her notebook on my desk with sticky notes. "Can we add a section on self-doubt? Or do you think metaphors help with technical terms?" She never used words like sorry. She didn't need to. She was speaking in something truer now: effort. The silence between us had changed. My parents still haven't reached out. Sometimes I wonder if they ever will. But the ache I used to carry has dulled into something I no longer mistake for grief. More like memory worn smooth by time. Terra Bloom has grown more sites, more students, more data that sings hope from the dirt. But some days I walk the back fields alone, notebook in hand, and think of the girl I used to be. The one who whispered ideas into jars of red clay. The one no one applauded. She never disappeared. She just waited for the world to grow quiet enough to hear her. And now, finally it has. Not with a roar, but with roots.